Chennai International Center and the Board of Directors. I welcome all of you for the 138th event of the CIC since its inception in 2016. And today's subject, I don't want to be presumptuous to say it is contextual and relevant. It is obviously very contextual and obviously very relevant. But what is going to be a standout in today's discussion is about technology trends, its relevance and implications to India as we look at the country's economic landscape today. We have very power-packed speakers, Professor Kamakoti, Mr. Ravichandran Purushottam, Mr. K. Ananthakrishnan, and moderator is none other than our own Lakshmi Narayanan. I am not going to introduce the speakers, Mr. Lakshmi Narayanan will do that. But just to set the context, and this is what really set me thinking in today's subject, is that about a month back, I was in my village near Namakkal district, and an old man was carrying plantain produce to be transported for sale in a village. He was going up and down 20-30 times. I was observing very closely and I asked him, how do you ensure that you get the best price for your produce in a village like this? He said, sir, technology use pandron sir, was his reply. I come back to Chennai and yesterday I read the Chartered Accountant Journal. We have to read that to stay relevant today. It's a very interesting article on risk-based analytics, use of technology to detect frauds. We do it all the time and frauds keep happening all the time. That's another issue altogether. But we are looking at one extreme situation where technology is being discussed at the remotest corner of the country, and an extremely opposite direction where large corporates are using risk-based analytics to stay relevant in today's world of sheer growth and sheer numbers. So this is the context, and I'm sure I'm not stealing the thunder from the subject because experts are sitting here to deal with that. May I request first all the speakers and the moderator to occupy the dais, and then I hand over the proceedings to Mr. Lakshmi Narayanan, the moderator, to take over the proceedings from here on. Thank you.
Just a couple of words. I'll add my welcome to the eminent panelists. I'm not going to read out, although I prepared something about them, but everybody in the technology area, they know all the three people here. Ravi Purushottam is the president of Danfoss. Danfoss is a very large Danish organization. He spends a lot of time with the technology. They are known for sustainability, decarbonization, climate change solutions, etc. And he is an active member in the Chennai Angels group, supporting and mentoring some of the new startups, particularly the deep science and tech startups. Plays an active role in the cell battery chemistry subgroup that we have within the Angels group. We have Professor Kamakoti, the new director of IIT. He is probably one of the most visible directors that we have had in the first 1 year of his directorship. Most welcome here. Thank you very much. He's going to be the keynote speaker today. And then we have Ananthakrishnan. I'm sure most of you would be familiar with him. He is the Chief Technology Officer of Tata Consultancy Services. He's been donning that role for the last several years. He also calls himself the Chief Travel Officer of TCS because he is most of the time spending time with the clients all over the world. So good panel. The format is we will have Professor Kamakoti talk for about 25-30 minutes about what he sees as the technology trend, and followed by Ravi Purushottam for about 10-15 minutes, Anand for about 10-15 minutes, and then we will interact. That's going to be the format, and I hope you have an enjoyable session. As Anand was saying, just before coming, I was reading about this metaverse, and I believe it is possible to have, just as we have a digital twin for a machine, it's possible to have a digital twin for a human being, an avatar, which can take care of some of the routine and mundane things like ordering the regular stuff that we have, fixing appointments, taking care of the schedule and things like that in future. Now that will be a fantastic world that we can get into. I hope we'll get to hear some of the technologies driving that in the future. Over to you, Professor.
So very good evening, and thank you for welcoming to this I think this is a second panel after post physical panel where myself and Anant are participating, and it's very enjoyable to talk to people. We have been talking to screens, and this is something very exciting. So some of the inspirations that came during COVID where we have been denied technology, right? There was certainly a denial of technology, and that pinched us quite significantly. And the statement which in one of the lockdown talks, which the Honorable PM addressed to the nation, he came out and coined this word Atmanirbharta, which is very, very important in today's context. One of the prime motivation for a lot of things that are going to happen, I would like to bring one case study which many people who have used it here, the Arogya Setu. Arogya Setu is an example of a software that was developed in 21 days by a group of 20 very sincere young people, and completely performance tested, security tested, which 19.1 crore people are using it today. And when the Honorable PM announced it, 25,000 hits per second was the download, which is one of these top hits. I think the next is the Irctc, which the ticket booking that happens, and this was one of the major achievements of that software. But when we wanted to actually release the software, we were in a dependency on some of the foreign companies to put it into their respective stores, and that we faced a lot of challenge. But nevertheless, this came out to be one of the best interdisciplinary work. There was a virologist involved who was characterizing Bluetooth technology for its the time of exposure and the time the two Bluetooth devices were in close proximity to each other. We needed to establish a correlation. This was done by an epidemiologist. There is a lawyer involved who were talking about the privacy and the security concerns of this. There are computer scientists involved. There are communication experts involved who are basically talking about the device drivers, etc. So almost some 5 to 6 disciplines of a regular engineering curriculum was involved in making this particular device. And that is where we are moving. If you talk about the next generation technology, we are moving into what we call as the cyber connected system, or what we call as the cyber physical systems. Now, let me talk of certain very important basic building blocks that are going to define India's next generation technology. The first one is the 5G. I am very, very happy and proud as an Indian today to tell you that for the first time in my career as 35 years of experience, and my predecessor, Professor Bhaskar's career, 45 years of experience in the field, first time we have gone into the 3GPP, the third generation project partnership, and have one Indian standard as top of it, right? And this is all possible because of several young professors who worked very much in close proximity to in a very, very coordinated fashion, wherein the technology today is, a mobile phone, right? The mobile phone, if you have a tower, there is going to be a reach or a distance. This particular technology will double the reach. So if this goes for 3 to 1.5 kilometers, it will give you 3 kilometers. So what is the impact? Impact number one, the number of devices, the electronic waste, that ultimately it is going to become a waste. Any tower you bring in, over a period of time, it is going to become an electronic waste. The amount of waste reduced by half. The amount of power that we are going to consume also reduces by half. And then today we will have much better rural connectivity, and that is also extremely important today. If you look at the 4G connectivity today, it is still maximum of 60%. If you look for 4G at certain places, we don't get it. So this digital divide has to be addressed, and I think this technology is going to bring up in a very big way. So the 5G technology, with lot of fight, I must say it is a Mahabharat Youth, that I am also a member of the National Security Advisory Board. We had been pushing from all fronts, and finally the government, the ministry, the DOT, everybody came together, and we were able to push this standard, and today it is a mandatory standard of the 5G. Now the next important thing that came out, for which I should congratulate the Tata group, is that we are now getting a complete Atmanirbhar 4G network. right? The complete network was dominated. We get certain boxes. We don't know what is inside that box, right? Today you are installing your apps. You go and say agree. What do you agree? Have you studied this? Right? No. Right? We have several boxes now, and all these things are today put everywhere. We don't know which data is leaking where, and we don't have any control. Maybe data is not leaking, but if there is always a possibility. And so there is a necessity for us to bring one particular network to our country, which is completely indigenous. So this effort was started 2.5 years before. It's precisely September 9, 2019, where we had a meeting in the office of the Principal Scientific Advisor, Professor Vijay Raghavan, where we conducted one seminar on can India build her own next generation network. Within 7 months, we are very happy that the Tata consortium, along with CDOT, a government organization, and a Tejas network, and a bunch of startups have now put together a completely indigenous Atmanirbhar 4G network. Everything is ours. Our software is ours, the hardware is ours, it's a completely commercially off the shelf. And if things go perfect, August 15th, we'll do our first call in that. So this is the biggest achievement which deserves a lot of things. And this is going to be the basic building block for next generation India. Now we are going to have BharatNet, which is going to have a lot more fiber connectivity. So the end mile connectivity, it is going to be through the mobile, will be solved using this. And the most interesting development is that 4G network can be easily upgraded to a 5G network. So if things go well, the BSNL will be the first to have a 5G for the country. And that is going to be a real feather in the cap for our Atmanirbhar mission. The next important set, so the other interesting developments that have happened, which in my opinion is going to be extremely a very important building block for our technology, is the National Security Directive, which has come from the government. The National Telecom Security Directive essentially says that every device that is going to be put on a mobile or telco network, there must be a trace of its supply chain. And over the line, there can be also a trace of what is inside it. There can be a security audit. Though this is part of the license agreement with every telco, now this is becoming sort of mandatory now, that every device that is going to get inducted into the network will go through this scrutiny, and that is going to be extremely important to have a full secure network for our country. The next important thing that has come up is the space. Today InSpace is an organization that is created. Now space privatization has happened in a large way. Now some of the interesting work that is happening, let me market my institute a bit. One of the startups, Agnikul, is now working towards, it is something like, how many people know Tamil? All of you, right? So, இப்போ வந்து ஒரு ராக்கெட்டை விடணுங்கிறது ஒரு கல்யாணம் பண்ணுற மாதிரி. கல்யாணம் எப்படி பண்ணுறோம்? ஒரு சத்திரத்துக்கு போகிறோம், சத்திரத்துக்கு போயிட்டு கல்யாணம் பண்ணுறோம், முடிச்சுட்டு வந்துடுறோம், அடுத்த கல்யாணம், அடுத்த பேர் வர அடுத்த கல்யாணம் நடக்கும். ஸோ இது மாதிரி ஒரு 3 ட்ரக்ஸ், ஒரு ட்ரக்கில் ராக்கெட் லான்ச் பேட் வித் த ராக்கெட், இன்னொரு ட்ரக்கில் கண்ட்ரோல் ரூம், இன்னொரு ட்ரக்கில் பவர் சோர்ஸ், 3 ட்ரக்கையும் போய் ஒரு ஸ்ட்ராட்டஜிக் பாயிண்டில் நிறுத்திட்டு இதை வச்சுட்டு ஒரு பட்டனை ப்ரெஸ் பண்ணுறோம், ராக்கெட் மேலே போகிறது, 3 ட்ரக்கையும் ஓட்டின் பின்னாடி வந்துடும், புது 3 ட்ரக் வரும், அடுத்த ராக்கெட் லான்ச் பண்ணலாம். This is the rapid launch that the country will need down the line. So what it is to make this possible, today we need to make rockets fast. So we have successfully done, if things go well, in the next 6 months we will have this parabolic launch, which we just launch, it goes like a parabola and falls down, but then all the parameters agree, then we are ready for the straight launch. So we have successfully now printed these engines, the rocket engines, using 3D printers. And that is the basic necessity that needs to come up here. In 2 hours, we can print 4 engines. And an engine basically has something like 3000 plus soldering points if you are going to manually do it. And all these things are taken care by the 3D printing. That essentially means the stability of the engine is going to be very good. So the tests are happening, and this is one very exciting thing that we can expect from India. The next thing is today, and that is extremely, again, and highly interdisciplinary work. So if you look at the constitution of, we are now having a space consortium at IIT Madras involving several startups and several major industry. Now we have 16 of them in the consortium. When you look at the disciplines, it's again 7 to 8 engineering disciplines. 8 departments of IIT Madras can participate constructively, meaningfully in this. The next important thing today is the what we call as the hyperloop. The transportation is actually going in a fast way. We are looking at, so this is going to be one very important technology. We are almost having a 500-meter track, and that experiment will be over in the next 8 months, where we send one pod from one end to the other end and study all the parameters. And if things go well, within the next 2.5 years, we could have at least from Chennai to Kanchipuram or Chennai to Kalpakkam, one hyperloop which can finish this distance off within a matter of 10 minutes. 10 minutes to Kanchipuram or 10 minutes to Kalpakkam. So this is something very, very interesting that's happening. And the next important thing is we are very committed to what we call as community farming. So IIT Madras, we have taken up an initiative called RASA, Regenerative Agriculture Stack Architecture. We are moving quite well, where we are trying to actually use technology, as someone mentioned. He mentioned that we are using technology. So community natural farming has been done very successfully in Andhra, right? So Andhra, there is one Ritu Samstha, RYSS, which has actually got more than 800,000 farmers. They have literally doubled their income by having a 365-day cropping seasons, by properly advising them on crops, different varieties of sowing, intercrops, and many, many things have been experimented. Even in water-starved region, how do we get crops to grow? And there are a lot of experiments that have been done. And I also believe that there will be a lot of patents that could come out of these traditional farming techniques. So my vision as a director of IIT Madras is within the next 5 years, I should at least have some 10 patents with 10 farmers and give them the complete license. So this is my vision, and I'm sure that that rural intelligence is going to be there. The next important thing that we had hit upon is medical technology. Medicine and technology have to start working towards each other. Nobody respected data. One thing that was certain about COVID is it is going to spread. One thing that is, that was certain about COVID is that it spreads because of proximity. Now we were able to get certain proximity data and based on that predict certain clusters of COVID. But doctors never believed, oh, you sit in an AC room and you are trying to do something. We know what is happening on the field. So there has been a very, very strong disconnect between the medical world and the technology world that we started realizing during this COVID, because we felt that technology could basically help in a large way to arrest this COVID spread. So subsequently, the National Digital Health Mission had been announced by the government, which essentially means that we need to bring technology, and there is no digital if no technology hits medicine. So a lot of work are happening. One of the work that we are doing at IIT Madras is this brain research, where we are taking a human brain and taking an imaging of up to 2,000 cuts of that brain. And then from that taking an impression and making a digital twin of the human brain, right? And at least the structural property of the human brain, we would have a digital twin. This is by complete imaging, and this is sort of first of its kind. And we are almost finished off with one human brain, and if that goes well, it will become an automated process. And this is going to be a major milestone in understanding the most beautiful organ. Blue Gene was a computer that bet Kasparov, which took several megawatts of power. Okay, well, the human brain is in watts, right? So the power of the human brain versus the power of a computer, if you just measure, if you just match it, nobody has understood how this brain works, and that is something that we are doing. And then we have a lot of technology which could help specifically from the assistive devices part. Recently, IIT Madras actually, with the support of TT Jagannathan Center, we gave the artificial leg, which around more than 100 people are started using it, and there were some feedbacks. So these are some very interesting and important directions in which we need to proceed. And all IITs today and IISc, we are now we are seriously pursuing to get a medical school in the very recent time. And I think this is where we strike. And I'm sure with the sort of enthusiasm that we are seeing from our young faculty, it is not far off that India will have a couple of Nobels in this field. Thank you. So I have another 9 minutes. Okay. So coming to the other part, today capacity building is extremely important. We are talking about semiconductors, right? We want to open fabs. Now who will run the fabs? It's a very important question. So, and very importantly, how do we reach the people? First, outreach has to be very important. So we have got some, we tried this 15 years before we started the NPTEL program, all IITs put together. IIT Madras was, is and will continue to be the coordinating institute for that. We have more than several lakhs of hours of lectures that have been recorded and put, courses that have been full courses. We never thought that there will be a pandemic, but during the pandemic, we actually found that any engineering student or any science student had some doubt. They could come to NPTEL and finish, and they wrote examinations well, right? So this was one very, very important achievement from the collective effort of multiple institutions who had put this entire program together. Based on that, we have started an online BSc program in data science. Data science is going to be the most important area down the line. Whether you are a chemical engineer, you are a biology engineer, or animal husbandry, anything, you need data, and you will get data, and you have to process data. And as he mentioned that we are using data to find out whether there is fraud. So to all the today credit appraisals, you need data analytics. Of course, many credit can be dressed, but but still, can we have data analytics to find the dressing also? So these are some very interesting things. And the entire data analytics is now forming the part of cyber security today. The attacks, the type of attacks, so there are a lot of critical infrastructure like our stock exchange, etc. And it has become a regular practice for our quote-unquote neighbors to come and keep hitting it. And we are still managing it because of a lot of AI interventions there. So we see some patterns of attack and go and do an antidote there. So data becomes extremely important. Today, a BCom graduate with a data science is a killer combination, right? So every bank would die to have such a type of person. So we have started this online BSc. So what are the characteristics of this BSc? Today there's no entrance exam. Okay, so that's just a simple qualifying exam. We also train the kid to qualify. No age bar. Appa and Pulla rendu peru edina paricha. Pulla got more marks, but both passed. Okay, so so no age bar. No cap on the number of students. We now have a system which can cater up to 50,000 or above students, and then we have a nice everything we have Tata. So Anant is part of thin blood of IIT Madras. So we have the TCS Ion, which we have experimented. We have grown together from 2005. I had been interacting with the team. So we have a very good online we have proctored examination, computerized examination platform, which can scale up to 3 lakhs or 4 lakhs. So we never have a way, and it can be slow paced. You can do it as and when you want, and then within 5 years you need to complete it. and there are multiple exits. So 1 year you do, you can take a certificate. Second year you do, you take a diploma. Third year you do, then you take a BSc. Fourth year you do, you take a BS. So multiple exits. These are all very much in adherence to the national education policy. And the most important thing, we have a lot of CSR grant, thanks to all the industry who have been participating in this. For any girl student with family income less than 5 lakhs, we give complete fee waiver. For any student with less than 1 lakh family income, we give complete fee waiver. It's all supported through CSR grants. So this is a program which we are very proud of. So the total, yesterday I just counted, I asked the dean students, we have 11,300 candidates physical. Right? No, this is inside IIT. The strength in the BSc is already 12,500. This you can clap. Okay. So within a year, we were able to double the total strength. So IIT, we do take the taxpayers' money. So we do exist on the taxpayers' money. So we need to be relevant to the society, and we have several satisfactory answers, some very powerful answer. The online BSc is a very powerful answer, and that is something which we want to basically nurture, and that is very important for the technology to grow. So we are also trying to look at applied electronics to be another online BSc, where we want to admit many students. So IIT, see, 15 lakh students write JEE main. 15,000 students we admit in JEE. So 14 lakh 85,000, they also want to become engineers. So at least some we can address to this. The other last two things that I want to tell here is the National Language Translation Mission. So I have another 3 minutes. The National Language Translation Mission is an attempt now wherein we want to create a layer where the input can be any language and the output can be a translated language. It can be speech and it can also be text. So an intermediate layer needs to be created, and this NLTM has started in a very big way, and that is going to be a very, very important constituent for the country. And in this context, we need our own mobile OS. So the IND OS is something which is very, very important. We need our own Play Store. If this is not there, we are gone. All our data is gone. I come out of a very important office in Delhi, and I get on my mobile. I'll not tell which mobile, but I get on the mobile. How was your experience in that office? Right? So we are losing our data left and right. Are you recording this? Okay. Doesn't matter. Right? So that is very, very important. So this is extremely important that we have our own OS, our own mobile OS, and our own Play Store. We are working very hard for it, and soon or less we will get. And there are a lot of security things. I don't want to bring lot of techniques here, but there's something called separation kernel. A separation kernel is a software that will lay between your hardware and the operating system. So today you don't know what is in the hardware. It's black chip. Really it's black box. And you have some commercially some software which you have not. We cannot go and analyze a million line software. So you have an untrusted software and an untrusted hardware. Now there is one layer which will monitor the interaction between the hardware and the software, and that is called separation kernel. Across the world, there was only one separation kernel, which cost 50 lakhs per license, right? And this was there across the world. Now, a Bangalore-based startup, it's incubated now by IIT Madras, has got the first indigenous separation kernel, which is going to, it's called Secure Weave, and that is going to define, in my opinion, everybody you are going to do your mobile transactions, and if I tell you the type of vulnerabilities that exist in your mobile, you'll never even touch it. Okay, I'm assuring you. Right? So this is going to define the security, the next generation security of mobile, and that is on card. So the INDOS. The next thing, there is one database that is ruling all of us. I know how many people are from banks, right? And financial institutions, BFSIs, right? All of you. There is one database, right? You all know that database. That fellow says, tomorrow I want support you. What will happen? One day night, whole economy will collapse. Whole economy will collapse. The biggest risk today. Okay. So we need to have our own IND database. And that is also something which we are pushing. And once we have, we'll come to all the BFSIs. Come and use. See, first and foremost, everybody will say, oh, it will collapse. When I started Shakti project, Anand said, we will talk about Shakti. I will not talk about that. But everybody, oh, processor, that is this will not work. With some 5 fellows, 10 months, 18 hours per day, I also sat, made the processor, taped it out in SCL in India, worked. It booted. Okay. So, this is all scare, right? This is a scare with all circling and this, bus, all these things. We should get out of it. And that is in the database is another very important technology. And all these things, finally, we need the hardware. We have the semiconductor mission now. That $10 billion has been announced by the government. Hopefully, we'll get some fab. Again, Tata should come out with a fab now. Tata Electronics we are looking at. A fab and also a good packaging center. And that is going to be, so the IND OS, our mobile OS, a complete database for our country and a complete fab. These are going to be the defining technologies or building blocks that is going to make us technology leaders. So thank you very much. I hope I made, as conveying sense here today. And I'm sure we will work on it. And next year, you're 238, 130.
Next year it will be.
So you're, at least 150 we can make an announcement of things are happening. By 200 we can show a product with things happening. Let us hope for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for giving me this opportunity, Mr. Lakshmi. Let me first talk a little bit about what I do and why I'm kind of connected to both technology and the relevance of India. We are a family-owned company, close to 90 years. One of the unique things about the company is we put in about 6 to 9% of R&D investment every year for the last 90 years, irrespective of what was the turnover. So that keeps us relevant, that keeps us very agile. We work in 3 distinct areas. One is we work on energy efficiency, we work on electrification, and we work on decarbonization. These are the 3 massive opportunities, and I think we are far more relevant to the world than we have ever been before. Now coming to, in terms of technology, but before I go into technology, I wanted to give you a kind of a contextual background. Why technology is relevant? I mean, when you look around the world, whoever has invested in technology, and technology has been truly become a resource liberating force. Take the case of solar energy. I think it was a technology which was about 20 years back costing much higher than coal, 4 to 5 times than coal today. Today it is 1/5 of coal, as just to give you the connect to how it becomes a resource liberating force actually. Therefore, I think when you look at the world today and look at from a megatrend perspective, there are 2 or 3 big megatrends that are unfolding in the world which becomes very relevant to India. One is clearly the climate change. When you look at the next 2 decades, the world is going to put in about $1.5 trillion year on year for the next 2 decades to decarbonize. And here I see why India is very relevant here. India is not the largest emitter, but India has got a great opportunity to encash this unfolding opportunity on decarbonization. Second, I think, is electrification. I think India has built quite a bit of base for the automotive sector, and this sector is kind of pivoting on its head, and it is moving to a new technology and a new trend in terms of mobility. And here again, India has a great opportunity to redefine and reimagine the automotive space as well actually. The third is, I think director spoke a lot about the new unfolding technologies, and one of the biggest energy guzzler in the future is going to be data centers. You need to cool data centers. Typically, a medium size of a data center, which holds, for example, a large university like IIT Madras, requires 3 to 4 megawatts of electricity. And I think, therefore, in the context of all of this, And considering what our Prime Minister has declared in terms of the climate change goals and the Panchamrit that he has defined for India, we are going to add about 500 gigawatts of renewables in the next 8 years. And we have actually added 520 gigawatts in the last 60 years of independence. So the goal is very ambitious actually. And we might think it is not doable, but actually this is where technology becomes a resource liberating force. And I'm a very optimist that we will do it because we have all the power to do it actually now. And I think we have all the demographic dividend to do that than ever before actually. Now let me step into cooling, which is one of the important parts where we believe cooling is becoming increasingly a much spoken topic in the world. There are a couple of reasons why. China makes 130 million air conditioners and India makes 30 million air conditioners actually. And when you look at the demographic change that is happening in India and the climate change that is happening in India, the rate of growth of air conditioners is going to put a stress on the energy system as well actually. And cooling is going to be a very complex problem because it's today consuming about 35 to 40% of the world's electricity. And it's a massive unknown part of what it is I'm saying here. Because cooling is such a huge, important aspect of energy. And this is an area where we have actually looked at it from our own views and put in a lot of disruptive work in India. One of the things we have built with Indian Institute of Science is to build the industrial refrigeration using CO2 technology. This is a multi-year research that we are working because India has multiple climatic zones and we believe in about 3 to 4 years we will crack this industrial cooling problem where we will kind of disrupt the energy by about 60% actually. So this is one of the big technologies using CO2 as a refrigerant actually. The second important technology that we are working in India is on the district cooling in cooling. I mean, if you take the gift city of Ahmedabad, and if you had to put air conditioners into that city, you might have to use about close to 900,000 air conditioners. That's the number of rooms there actually, and the whole community actually there. Now you could do that alternatively by distributing chill water across the whole city and putting an indoor unit into each of the rooms actually. This is how cooling is innovating actually as well. And by doing that, we actually disrupt the energy requirement by again about 30-40% actually. So this is the second trend. District cooling is becoming a very, very important trend actually. The third important thing in cooling that is going to come up in the next years in India is really around the space cooling. Now if some of you have been watching what Elon Musk has been doing is, he's been using phase change materials for cooling actually. He doesn't use electricity. He uses the heat pump, and he uses the heat pump to take the heat out of the batteries in his Tesla car, and then he has used the heat to convert it into cooling, and he's cooling the car actually. It's a completely different. So heat pump is another big technology that we are working, which actually helps you to not only give hot water, but also gives you cooling actually. You can do both with that particular technology actually. So these are 3 simple examples that I wanted to bring to your notice. Second, in terms of decarbonization, electrification is a very, very important area where India needs to get its arms and hands around it actually. And in electrification, there is the mobility part of the electrification and then the non-mobility or off-road mobile applications actually. The biggest pollution emitter in a city is the construction dust. And in the construction dust, you actually use a diesel engine to really build. Whether it's your bucket excavators or the machines that are used for construction. This needs to be electrified, and this is another area where we are working with some of the large OEMs to electrify them so that you can calm down the diesel consumption as well actually. So this is going to be also another big area where India is going to play a very important role. We have worked with the Department of Electrical Engineering to build the grid robust systems in IIT Madras, where we are putting this technology together because India also has grid challenges as well. So to make the machine more robust, we have built that kind of technology as well in electrification. Also in the marine industry, I mean from 2030, you cannot have any vessel that is using diesel. And even the ports that are handling, especially the Chennai port, the Tuticorin port, they all have to move from the current source of diesel to a new source, which is solar or wind as well. So here again, offshore wind turbines on the sea, combined with all these electrification ship-to-shore power supply, is another area that India becomes very relevant here as well from its own disrupting its energy footprint actually. Of course, I'm a little bit not in favor of green hydrogen and carbon capture because personally I feel green hydrogen is another 10-15 years away. We still are not at the TRL 4 or even TRL 9 on many of these technologies. But I guess it will come, but again, at what phase it will come, we do not know actually. But right now, I think between now and 2030, we just need to use these technologies to really accelerate and harness the full potential that we have in terms of energy efficiency in all of these applications. So that's the one part that I wanted to leave you all with. Don't get me wrong, I'm not against green hydrogen, but again, green hydrogen is a very expensive solution today actually. It still needs to get cheaper. The whole electrolysis process needs to get cheaper, but I guess we will get down the road in 2030 and 2040 to a better technology there. And it's a very good energy carrier as well. India has put in the green hydrogen policy as well right now, but we are still a long way off to get to green hydrogen. Carbon capture is another technology for decarbonization, but again here we are still at a TRL 4 or TRL 5 because of course SpaceX and Elon Musk are talking about converting carbon to space fuel, but I'm not really sure whether there's any company that has cracked this carbon capture as well, because this is really relevant for high abating industries like cement and steel, because they use a lot of diesel and carbon emissions coming from the furnaces as well. So that's clearly some of the things that are not there right now, but clearly there's a lot of innovation happening and there's a lot of push going on around that area as well. But I just want to round it up to say that this whole decarbonization presents significant opportunity for only one reason. India is going to lead the world in what I call as deep digital decarbonization. And this deep digital decarbonization, India would be capable of doing it because we have the software skills, we have the technology background to make it happen. And I think when all of this is put together, I think India would be really a big leader there. And I think this is an opportune moment for India actually to lead the world in terms of decarbonization. The last thing that I wanted to share with you all is one of my favorite subjects, which is food and food related technologies actually. The same Namakkal district has one of the best cold storages, which has bananas exported to Austria, by the way. So there's a lot of technology that has been put in different produces of what India is coming up with. When you look at a high level, India today is producing about 250 million metric tons of milk. And we have started processing up to 45% of the milk. We are doubling our milk capacity in the next 15-20 years, which means we will be about 500 million metric tons of milk. And milk is today one of the most nutrition solving problems of India as well actually. I mean 25-30 years back, we used to export milk powder to Sri Lanka and Bangladesh actually, but today milk has become, we are really leading the world in milk is something that I want to be very proud to tell you all actually. And 70 to 80% of the milk is cooled by us, so that's why I'm saying this with pride. The second important thing is our horticulture. India has done extremely well actually, and here is what I wanted to talk about technology. I think the whole digital ecosystem of food innovation hub has been very favorable for the farmers. It's just unfortunate we didn't get the farm laws passed, but I guess it will come at some point in time. But clearly what is happening is over the last 15-20 years, we have reduced the losses in apples by about 25% through the cold storages and the innovation we have done on the entire value chain. If you take Tamil Nadu bananas, we produce about 25 to 30% of Tamil Nadu bananas. We have actually reduced losses by about 60% in Tamil Nadu using technology. What we have tried to do is very simple. We get into this cluster, we build an ecosystem play there, we do grading, sorting, pre-cooling, branding, last mile connectivity and export. And all of this really happens through particularly through a ecosystem play, because you need partnership model here, because every partner on the platform comes up with different skills actually. The skills which I may have on cooling, Bayer may not have on another area actually. So it is a partnership play, and I think this food innovation hub is emerging as a very, very disruptive business model in India right now. Madhya Pradesh has got already 3 food innovation hubs for onions. They have one for millets, and Maharashtra already has the grape ecosystem. Today Maharashtra exports grape to almost every part of the world actually. So I'm very optimistic that, you know, as we move into the next century or next decade maybe, we would be a very large player in the food and food processing, and as well as the horticulture exports out of India actually. The last thing that I wanted to talk about, it is on the opportunity this FTA is giving to India. The food opportunity is humongous actually. And the reason I say this is that at some point in time, China, which is leading today China is the largest exporter, about 15 to 16% China exports on processed food, and also China exports on shrimps and seafood actually. Now, this is an opportune moment for India to grab it, because India has a huge domestic production actually. But the challenge with us is we don't process the seafood that we produce actually. It's either get processed in Vietnam or it gets processed somewhere. For this again, we are working with the Indian Institute of Science to put in a platform where we can use CO2 again as a technology and really do all of the cooling that we need here, do the processing we need here, and also combine this with the water that we requires. It also requires large amount of water, because when you export seafood, you also export ice. So you need to make sure that you also disrupt the cost of water as well as the cost of energy there actually. So this is another massive opportunity that India is working. I guess there are a lot more things that we are doing actually here, and I believe digital is getting all pervasive, because even in seafood industry you can use digital twin to identify where the losses are and really plug them actually. So I think the opportune moment for India is now, and I'm very, very optimistic that, you know, the food and energy, India is going to lead the world by 2030. Thank you very much. Yeah.
So it's a little bit like a T20 match where, you know, the first 2 batsmen have done such a fantastic job, but there's still a few overs left, so I'll do my best. But in terms of what I'm going to talk about, I'll focus on, I don't need the slides. I'll focus on what I'm good at, which is the information technology industry, and give you a picture of where we are today in a couple of minutes. Then what is it that the foreseeable future is about for this industry, and then I'll talk about the opportunities for India in my last few remarks. So today the IT industry in India is a visible industry. We are a very large employer in the organized sector. So we, give or take, we employ about 5 million people directly, and perhaps another 15 or 20 million people indirectly in terms of the ecosystem that we create. It's a very rare industry from an India context where India dominates the global market. Right? The last estimate of market share that NASSCOM and other bodies publish, that India has 55% of the global market in this industry. Practically no other industry we dominate to this extent. The other metric which is even more interesting is that if you look at the top 10 industry players, private companies in the world, that list is dominated by Indian companies. My own company is, I think, number 2, number 3 on that list. But if you look at the top 10, there are half a dozen Indian companies, which is an extraordinary kind of a feature as well. And then, of course, it reflects back in 8% of our GDP, 27% of our exports, etc., come through this industry. So it's been a good success story from an India perspective. The IT industry has many remarks, and I really enjoyed Ravi's talk about the food and even earlier remarks that you made about technology in the hands of everybody. The pervasiveness of information technology in the hands of the consumers, in the hands of primary industries, agriculture, mining, etc., all the way to secondary and even tertiary industries, education and so on, which Professor Kamakoti talked about. that impact is now universal, at least from an India perspective and even globally. There is a statistic that a good friend of mine, Krish Ashok, usually throws up, which is you can go back and check it up on any data set. More people in India use mobile phones and therefore hopefully some technology compared to toothbrushes. A toothbrush. 800 million toothbrushes are sold in India every year. Assuming that we change a toothbrush every 3 or 4 months, that means about 200 million people use a toothbrush. 1 billion people use a mobile phone. Right? So a toothbrush is deemed to be less necessary than a phone. Right? I find it difficult. I have a toothbrush, but I don't have a mobile phone, so I'll leave it at that. Okay. So, but on the public goods side of information technology, India has done phenomenally well with very, very visible programs like Aadhaar, our unified payment interface for financial services, the financial inclusion program where millions and millions of unbanked Indians have got bank accounts now, which even in the pandemic, the direct benefit transfers of subsidies and all that really helped because we had the infrastructure. Professor Kamakoti talked about education. Right? The whole NPTEL and now the larger Swayam program has really been the backbone of a public good which has enabled our children all the way up to universities to get some education during the pandemic. Right? And that has been something which is really outstanding. And then the COVID thing, he talked about the Arogya Setu. But if you look at the vaccine infrastructure, you look at the testing infrastructure, there was practically no indigenous test kit manufacture in India for COVID-19 when the pandemic hit us. Today, because of many things done by private sector, small scale industries, the government, the COVID test kit manufacturing ecosystem is real. Hundreds of companies are part of what is called a COVID test kit data marketplace, where demand and supply signals are matched. And we are manufacturing. In fact, tomorrow I'm going to be tested because I'm going to the US tomorrow night. So it shows that it works. And our testing fees are perhaps the lowest in the world at this scale. Right? So all of this, I think, is a good story. And clearly the academic ecosystem, the startup ecosystem, the large and mid-sized and small companies all had a role to play. What are the opportunities that the IT industry is looking at? So here and now clearly is there. The world is waking up to the possibilities in the post-pandemic era of larger and larger engagement and involvement of information technology in every part of their operation. It's no longer just a back office function that you will do your accounting and your inventory and a few other things, and everything else runs independent of information technology. Today, information technology is absolutely essential from boardroom down to shop floor to the end customer and back. And all the buzzwords are there. Cloud is there, data is there, cybersecurity is there, and communications technologies are there. And that's what is fueling all the interest in the stock market on IT companies and the growth and all that. The next stage up, logically, is what is called the AI-enabled enterprise. What is that? AI is pervasive. It's been invented 70 years ago. In a series of things which, amongst many others, Alan Turing, the pioneer in computer science, also contributed. But in the last 10 years, it has become very, very visible. And the next 10 years, every industry is going to use something or the other related to this technology in that industry. Whether it's food, whether it's agriculture, whether it's healthcare, whether it's banking, financial services, fraud detection, and so on and so forth, will be AI powered. This transition is going to come. It has downsides. There is a whole concern about ethical AI. India has a huge opportunity because we are a democracy. I mean, there are countries which are not democracies, which potentially are using AI in many ways which are sort of borderline on, is this really right or wrong? We hopefully will get all those checks and balances right, and we'll be a guide for what is the best practice of using AI in this context. In a proper and ethical way going forward. Digital twins were talked about. in the context of the brain by Professor Kamakoti. But today, digital twins at various scales of granularity are real. Harking back to the pandemic for a minute, the city of Pune was twinned by a lot of people, a consortium of NGOs, the government, TCS was involved with the core technology and so on. So we were able to twin the whole city. It's a city of probably 3 or 4 million people with lots of wards and streets and so on. So the whole city was twinned. Why? Not for fun, but for playing back what has happened in terms of the outbreak and what could happen if certain mitigation steps were taken in terms of unlocking something, allowing barber shops to open but not schools, allowing buses to run at this frequency instead of that frequency. If you want to run this kind of complex multivariate simulation, you needed a twin. So that twin has taught us so much. Now we can actually twin a whole company if you want. Down to your behavior of your customers, to your supply chain, to your back office, front office, your supply, everything can be now twinned, and the company can simulate, just like at very high expense the defense forces and all run these war games. Every company could do simulations of how they will do. Hopefully they'll take the right decisions. That's a separate question. And in industries that Chennai does well, healthcare, automotive, this is going to become even more important. Right? And automotive, like Ravi just said, is going through a massive change. Electrification, more and more software and electronics in cars. The chip shortage suddenly hits cars and automotive, which you would have never thought about. You think about car as a automotive as a mechanical engineering department problem. Today it is a computer science problem, electrical engineering problem, electronics engineering. It's a multidisciplinary platform. Right? And so that is going to open up completely new vistas in the way in which automotive industry is going to absorb this. All the buzzwords, industry 4.0, etc., etc. We are very good at all that buzzwords and the technology, of course. So that is on the technology side, AI-led enterprises. But if I look at where all of you can probably help us in the technology industry, is that there are a lot of technologies today, let me call them ecosystem technologies, where we have invented the technology, just like we invented AI in the 50s, we actually have no clue how to actually use it in a business context. There is a long list of them, blockchain being one. Blockchain is a big hammer looking for a nail to hit. Right? Data marketplaces I mentioned. There's a nice use case in the COVID test kit manufacturing where a whole ecosystem of very strange companies which don't know each other needed to share data. How do you make that happen? But there are several such. 5G, Professor Kamakoti mentioned. It's not just better downloads on mobile phones for watching movies. The true potential of 5G is in the industrial, the consumer, and the what is called the massive implementation in smart cities, smart agriculture, smart everything. We have invented the technology, but how it will be actually used and scaled has to come from folks in this room, because you understand your businesses, your industry. So these ecosystem technologies in healthcare, in automotive could reinvent your technology. Metaverse was talked about. Right? Very cool. Most of metaverse building blocks have been invented since the 90s. We used to call it something else, augmented reality, virtual reality, this, that, and the other. But somebody came up with this fancy word, and now everybody is talking about metaverse, right? And everybody is now saying, of course we can do metaverse. But will metaverse of this meeting work? Whose benefit? Will metaverse of a whole industrial plant work, or will metaverse of a hospital work, or what? That's where the business model innovation has to drive the technology. So that's my third category of ask. Lastly, there is the blue sky technology where, again, we are very good at exploring things. I'll just mention one or two. Quantum computing is now a very important aspect of physics, chemistry, electronics, of course, computing, and many other disciplines coming together. This decade will see practical, large quantum machines which will be real. Now, they will solve many types of problems, including potentially decrypting a lot of our current so-called secure public key infrastructure information, which is a separate challenge in itself. That apart, quantum computing will solve some of those problems, like green hydrogen, Ravi mentioned. It's estimated that to simulate hydrogen in steel making, steel making is another very strong user of carbon because it's core to the process of reducing iron ore into steel. It can be done with hydrogen, but to figure out whether a current blast furnace will actually function properly if if you just swap hydrogen and carbon, needs enormous computing power. Nobody has that power today. A quantum machine with roughly 200 qubits can do it. So I would suspect that quantum machines will be used for such grand challenges the moment they are practical and available to solve these kind of issues. But every other challenge, climate change, decarbonization, food, nutrition, water, they will benefit from this kind of computational runway that's building up. What does it mean for India? India, I think, we are good because we sort of celebrate the tech industry. We are Lakshmi is a superstar. He goes out to a campus, there'll be 10,000 people wanting his autograph. That doesn't exist in many industries. Right? So we have a brand, we have done extremely well. And like Professor Kamakoti said, areas like defense, areas like space and so on, we are opening up, and now there will be lots more to be done. Sustainability is another opportunity. But the challenges that I think we will see, and I was part of a committee to say what should India 2047 focus on. So clearly opportunities lie in the following, and I'll just enumerate them, we don't have time. Engineering, manufacturing, design, that needs to improve its absorption of technology in India. We are way behind. I don't know, I have worked with Danfoss many years ago. I think if they can teach us how to adopt technology in our companies here, that will be phenomenal. Semiconductors, Shakti processor, Professor Kamakoti's pioneering personal effort. The technology has been invented and it's outstanding in what it can do. But we have to make the chips here, we have to build the software on those chips, we have to make sure that that entire stack, the India stack as it is called, works at scale. For Chennai, we are building a name in a niche area called SaaS, Software as a Service, especially for enterprises. It's a huge opportunity. Whatever Zoho is doing, whatever Freshdesk is doing, Freshworks is doing, we need 50 more companies like this, and perhaps 500. Somehow our mindset and skill set in India is always very analytical. We are not very good at synthesizing stuff, but we can analyze and break things up very fast. So courses like this data science course, the data analytics, sheer amount of brain power we can bring onto it. There are lots of us, India has the demographic advantage. I think that will be a powerhouse for India, for the world going forward. Lastly, use of technology is not just going to be about the good guys. Humanity has always had bad guys and bad actors. Cybersecurity is a massive opportunity for India. Just like Switzerland has built a reputation for being highly secure for financial transactions, India has an opportunity to be the destination, to be the cybersecurity hub for the world. And that could be, I think, a major idea. All of this needs skills, it needs talent, it needs policy, it needs IP, it needs research, it needs smart people, entrepreneurs. But I'm sure we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Anand. Thank you, Ravi and Professor. So we'll open up for questions. As you prepare for the questions, let me quickly put my thoughts across. There are 4 domains that they covered, starting with Professor Kamakoti on COVID, vaccine, COVID related. That's a huge area. Genetics and microbiology, biology, vaccine development is a huge area where there's plenty of development that's happening. In today's paper, in the Hindu, there was a talk about warm vaccine for COVID, vaccine that can be distributed at room temperature, something a research company has found out from Indian Institute of Science, and the whole area of genetics, mRNA-based things, and it goes even beyond that. Biofoundries, biosynthetics, organisms that can be grown in a lab that feed on plastics and solve some of the environment problems. So that's the extent to which that biology, genetics, that area is going. The second area that they talked about was matter and energy. Okay. How solar power, nuclear power, wind power, etc. The battery chemistry is changing dramatically. We are so used to only the lithium-ion batteries. But for energy storage systems, we already have molten batteries that operate at 500 degrees, molten liquid, that can run for 20 years without any problem, guaranteed. So that's another thing that is happening in that area of energy and matter, including nuclear power. Nuclear power is making a comeback with safer fuels, thorium-based fuels, which are quite safe, proliferation resistant. We had a couple of seminars in CIC talking about that. And the third area was about sensors and motion. Whether hydrogen is all right, what kind of sensors do we need for the space program that we have? It's all remote controlled. Nobody is manning it. What kind of sensors should we have? How should that be managed? Again, a huge area where a large development is happening. And the last area, of course, is computing, communications, cognition, understanding the human brain. How does it work? It won't be a surprise if someday we have a circuit diagram of a human brain. This is how the neurons and the synapses connect, and this is the type of this thing that we have. It's phenomenal. And if you look at metaverse, I think Anant was talking about metaverse, one of the most influential supermodels in Instagram is not a human being. It's an avatar in metaverse. So that's how good technology is. So it's going to be great. The next 10, 20 years going to be fantastic. Let's have some questions. Somebody raised a hand there. Yeah, please.
You talked about the cooling and refrigeration as causing a lot of climate change. I think the Tesla octo-valve heat pump that you mentioned, which can do, is that something that can be deployed on a bigger scale? That's one. And secondly, the refrigerants which are used in cooling systems, they are a big cause of emissions and the temperature, global warming. So are there better refrigerants? You mentioned carbon dioxide, but are there something else?
So actually, firstly, air conditioning is a dirty business because you take electricity, then you compress it with a chemical, and you throw the heat from the room outside to the ambient actually. So it's a little bit of a dirty business actually. But I think the business is now moving towards sustainable cooling, where we're using low global warming potential refrigerants. Second, I think with CO2, ammonia and other refrigerants possible, this area is getting more and more investments, and potentially you will see this getting disrupted. I mean, what I hear is 100 years back, we only had natural refrigerants. And in fact, even Indian Institute of Science is working on propane blends, isobutane, CO2, and all of this actually is giving better performance right now actually, but they need to be more commercialized. They are around TRL 4-5 actually. Another 2-3 years down the line, I guess they will move to TRL 9 and then we can commercialize it actually. So that's one trend that is clearly emerging as well. Second, I think there are also a lot of other innovations happening. For example, in Chennai, if you want to do district cooling in T Nagar, you can go down in the marina and take cool water below 500 feet down, put it into a pipe, so that the energy you need to further cool comes down because you're taking a chilled water down actually. So there are multiple technologies that are available actually. But execution in India is difficult because this is something which is a state subject, and you know how difficult it is to deal with state. So it's a lot of technologies are available. Many cities have done it. So there's no other way for us to disrupt the whole energy envelope. We need to work around with technology. So actually, the Indian cement industry is done a huge amount of disruption on energy. In fact, we are the leading producers of most energy efficient cement in the world right now actually. But again, yes, carbon capture is something which cement industries are hoping that they will fix it actually. Steel is even more than cement at the moment in India. Steel and chemical and pharmaceutical and those kind of industries as well. But certainly, yes, they are all, because for example, even in a factory which is pharmaceutical, you use diesel engine to generate hot water. Now this is a very good application with the CO2 technology. But again, you need to understand, we are fixing the engine when the plane is flying. So it's not easy actually.
Professor Kamakote, I think whatever you said made me feel very proud to be an Indian, so thank you for that. My question is, I come from a very remote village in southern Tamil Nadu, and that tiny shop now I can pay on Google Pay. But is something like this available in states like Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh? I'm just worried that all of this is for the big cities in India, for the relatively more developed states like Tamil Nadu. What about the rest of India?
Sure, that is what we try to address when we go into the 5G domain. We want to bridge exactly this connectivity problem, and the reason why this has not reached there is also from the connectivity issue. So as you see that the Niti Aayog has come out with a set of districts called aspirational districts, and many of these aspirational districts are getting specific concentration. With the BharatNet proliferation, where there will be a fiber up to a panchayat level, and the 5G technology, and a careful deployment of spectrum. So as Anant mentioned, that spectrum, the 5G is not something for a high-speed download where you see a high definition. It's going to be a sort of an economy changer, right? So there are multiple other applications that are going to come. I think with these we need to address. And one thing that I think government will now take forward is spectrum is not given just for the auction or the money or the license fee, but it must be that there should not be a black spot or whatever dark spot or a shadow. It should ensure that that particular band is completely utilized across country, and the technology reaches the people. So these are some of the basic things which we believe will happen. And certainly, and importantly, so far, there was not a use of the spectrum. Today, I go to my village. I also I'm from a remote village in Tamil Nadu. There's almost 100% cell phone usage and smartphone usage, not just feature phone. I think in the aspirational district also, over a period of time, this will happen.
So if I may just add, this cell phone coverage is one enabler. But if you look at the entire developed world, they don't have what we have. Google Pay in the US is nowhere as pervasive as it is in India. In fact, Google has gone on record in the US Congress to say, please give us the backbone, which we built 8-9 years ago, called the National Payments Backbone. That is missing in practically every country in the world. Right? So without that, it's very difficult for an American, a British citizen, an Australian, and so on to do things like what we do. Which was mentioned, right? You can go and pay for a banana in a village. Just does not work at all in most parts of the world. So that also is an enabler. So NPI we already have. The connectivity is where we lack. They have nearly universal cell phone coverage, but they can't pay with that as easily as we do.
And for that you need the spectrum, and once the spectrum comes, I think phone will come. So that chicken and egg, that chicken will come first, then the egg will. Right.
My question is to Mr. Anant Krishnan. You made a very interesting statement at the end by saying in some areas we are using a lot of technology, we have overplayed there. In some areas like engineering design, we have some strides to catch up. Do you think that's a big handicap, or you think we are getting there very quickly? What do you think is the time horizon where this will get fixed?
No, the opportunity set that I described, all of them have started. I mean, India does a fair bit of engineering design for the export market. And it's a very large business, which all the major technology players we already do. But what I was saying is that can there be an equally large India market for such things? That is not yet there to the extent that it should be.
We are perhaps living at a time in history where technology is, galloping at the most rapid pace across a variety of areas. Where does this leave humankind? With 8 billion people to be supported, particularly in a country like India, are we staring at acute unemployment some time to come? I mean, there have been tomes written about what will man do when there is no work to do, and so on. But your perspectives, Professor, and maybe the others can chip in.
I am trying to hire, in my previous assignment as an associate dean of ICSR, I was trying to hire one programmer. And I did find one very bright candidate, a very young girl, in Tiruvallur. She said she will relocate here, and with negotiation, right? She just finished 60,000 rupees per month is what I fixed. Next day she called me, sir, I've got a job for 80,000 rupees. So No, it's not one part. This is the part of the story and only part of the story. What I'm saying is, we need to fix the education system. We need to create that reskilling. And we have enough amount. Anand can tell you how much attrition he has in TCS and how much he needs. I'm just talking about 1 or 2 forums. Today we have so many projects where we are looking at project just look at IITs. Today my requirement is something like 3,000 people with different skill sets across the 16 departments I have, including humanities. We are not able to find that particular attitude, that particular skill set that is expected out of that age. Not missing. So the reason is I don't know whom to blame, I don't want to blame anyone, but we need to fix this problem. And I believe that reskilling is the only way out. And that is where we are experimenting now. Go reach everybody. We have opened rural technology centers. We have opened rural interaction centers. We have 10 of them. Every evening from 6 to 8, some IIT and set of volunteers talk to the kids there. We really want to put some effort to see, are we going to get that people whom we want? So this is, now where is unemployed? I am now having a job for 60,000 a month. Get me a programmer. I'm very happy.
Sir, if I may just conclude that there are philosophical books, Yuval Noah Harari's book or Max Tegmark's book and all that on the impact of AI, etc., which are at least good pointers to what we perhaps should not do. And they are all books worth reading for sure, because we need to be educated. The practical situation that Professor indicated is there today. There is an interesting concept that the Tata Group chairman N. Chandrasekharan came out with in his book called Digital Nation, which says that technology can be used as an enabler for completely new jobs which don't exist today. Right? So there is a truth perhaps somewhere in all of these things that we have to discover. India, I think, has a lot of time to make this transition. A, we have a demographic dividend. B, we have a growth economy. C, we have a plethora of new age jobs already which are visible, and so on. So we will perhaps not hit this at least for a few decades to come. Now we have to use those decades well enough so that we don't face that problem, because the problem contours are visible, right? So I think we are smart enough to figure it out.
And when we went on the multilingual stuff, right? Today I need a person who can translate from English to Tamil, Sanskrit to English. Completely all our BA Sanskrit, BA Tamil, BA Telugu. We have a lot of departments existed once upon a time. My father was a professor of Sanskrit at University of Madras. The department, there was a Radhakrishnan Center for Advanced Philosophy. Today there's one faculty there. Okay, we have killed completely, language has gone. Correct? Now, we need today, we're struggling to have one Sanskrit translator, one Tamil translator. English to Tamil translation. And this will be a job for next 5-6 years. We don't have. So these are some of the issues that we need to look at. Right.
I had So first I must thank all the 4 speakers. I really felt proud to be Indian listening to all of you. And my question is, I'm asking you for advice. Chennai has been a home for very, very strong traditional manufacturing companies. We built world-class competencies in what we do. I work for a tire company. But when I see these opportunities, the advice is, how can we leverage the competencies we built up over so many years to make use of the opportunities you've pointed out? That's a question we are asking ourselves. And what would your advice be to traditional manufacturing companies?
So one of the things that I'm giving from a technical angle, traditional manufacturing companies have not captured upon the data that they have generated. This is one part that we may look at. For example, today you want to fine-tune a scooter engine, right? When you go through that fine-tuning mechanism, I just went to one of the companies, then it actually generates more than 2 gigabytes of data per day. This data was never even stored or utilized. Data now gives a very good, interesting thing about the organizational, technical memory of your company. So that is one part which can be one as a suggestion. As a computer scientist, I can give you this. Of course, other people can add. Yeah.
I think you need to reimagine your industry 10 years from now or 20 years from now. and then work backwards. For example, advanced materials is an area where it is under-harvested. Also, there's a lot of data inside the tire which probably you need to look at how to use them. When to use the data and how to use the data and where to use the data. So there's an awful lot of stuff you can do around if you reimagine how a tire would look like 20 years from now and work backwards. Take the simple example of Tesla tire actually. I understand that's very different from many other tires because the weight of the batteries and at the speed at which it is traveling actually, there is some kind of a correlation to that actually. All of that I believe was done in a lab in India. So there's something awfully happening as well here on that.
You talked a lot about positive trends across India in terms of technology, and it was quite interesting hearing that the mobile phone is more used than the toothbrush. More moving parts, I guess, in the mobile phone, more complexity. What about the concerns in terms of technology trends? I mean, only one of you hinted at cybersec being potentially a serious stopgap or something that may disrupt. But there are clearly many others in terms of genetically modified foods that we heard once upon a time that slowed down agricultural development in terms of trends. What are the concerns you have in terms of some of the technology trends that are out there?
As a professor, I am very, very scared about WhatsApp and Facebook and this because it completely today when I talk about offline examination to my students today, there's a big sort of I'm feeling a revolution that's happening in the class saying they don't want to come for an offline. So this is one bad thing about technology. I believe I have moved out of many of this is the social media has indeed brought in much more difficulties than what you say comforts, right? So this is one bad impact that I can say for sure. And especially young kids, there are a lot of distraction today, and this is not bringing the correct one. But the positive aspect is, in the time of COVID, this has been a very effective way by which we communicated. So that's a plus and balances. On the other front, I'll restrict to computer science per se. Today, mobile technology, we are looking at multiple things, like, for example, lab on a chip is going to be something on. So the mobile will, as it, see, in 1998 when mobile phone first came, we thought that we will use it only for talking. Today we use it for everything other than talking, right? So there's a complete shift. So the next disruption that may come in this would be that it will be used for multiple health-related monitoring. And so that is one part. And the main thing there is, my worry is that if these sensors are not properly characterized, or it is having some other difficulties in terms of electrical difficulties. Like, for example, I don't supply a particular voltage to a sensor, or it doesn't wake up and it gives me a wrong parameter. So this technology, when it is deployed in a very large sense, the accuracy of that in monitoring certain health parameters or many intricate parameters, that is going to be a major challenge. But things are moving in that direction. I can take a drop of blood and put it on the mobile phone and get my blood sugar tested. And that is, we are going towards that. So this is the second part. The third part is, of course, and as and when we bring this technology much closer to us, we are working with black boxes. And there's certainly, for example, one of the phones today had a feature called track the phone. And if I enable that track the feature, our friendly neighbor can basically stop me from communicating. So because this track the phone has a connection to a server there, and there could be certain commands which can come and they can stop the phone. So we really don't know what this device, who is controlling this device. And that is going to be the biggest challenge and biggest concern from a security point. So these three are something that as a computer scientist I can comment.
No, friends, I think all of you will agree that this subject can go on and on, but I'm sure our chairman Gopal will agree with me if I suggest that we should have probably a one-day session on this subject itself. So that will be very useful.
So what is the extent of involvement of women in technology? I had to ask this question today because when I entered the hall, it's an all-male panel, and there's hardly any representation from our gender. So, I mean, at the bottom of the cone, you do see a large number of women in academics or as in a profession. But as you go up, is there a fallout? And when it comes to cutting-edge technology or R&D, does it become a male bastion?
Not necessarily, but today in the top 75 women, we have 3 from IIT Madras. I'm very proud to tell you that. And last decade, one of the biggest administrative challenge, of course, administrating institute like IIT Madras is a big one. We have been having women register, and they have been. We had Dr. Usha Titus, then Dr. Bhuma, and now Dr. Jain. They had been one of the fantastic, administrators. So it is. So there's nothing like certainly, women are doing very well when given an opportunity. And we, from IIT Madras, we are encouraging this. For example, I was also part of the committee which said that 20% we want to bring the total, intake in JEE for women students to 20% in every institute. So we are giving supernumerary seats to bring in women here. So this is one very important thing. And on the sciences, we actually, in sciences and humanities, we find more women candidates than male. And we are also seeing many people now coming forward to taking up certain administrative positions also, and also some lot of other outreach type of activities. So, there are also going to be special drives to recruit and encourage women to come into this. And there are a lot of government regulations or government orders that have now made the employment conditions for women better. For example, today we have a larger maternity leave, larger type of childcare leave, etc. So I think things are moving in a positive direction, and I'm sure that this gap will. I agree that there is a gap. I'm not denying that, but certainly it will be filled, and we are also working very seriously to fill that gap.
Thank you.
May I request all of you to give a round of applause for a extremely comprehensive, detailed, and a very graphic coverage of a very complicated subject. We'll try to do it. I think Professor very rightly remarked, once a year we have to do a reality check on this subject, where we are progressing, what is the gaps that we need to fill up. Our next event is on 22nd, and the mailers will come to all of you. We are issuing technology. We are going out of virtual and having in-person meeting. So please arrive in large numbers. We want the hall full, and we request you all to be available for the next meeting also. Thank you one and all, and thank you for the speakers.